Hello, everyone. I'm here with Michael to talk about Nakshatras and some of the wonderful things he's doing with Nakshatras. Nice to have you here, Michael.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Ernst.
Sure. So yeah,
Been wanting to come on. Go
yeah,
ahead, you first.
we were just chatting casually, I think a week or two ago, and you told me about this new Nakshatra course you were doing, and I was sort of interested in it. And one of the things that you told me real briefly, you said that one of the things you're doing differently in the course is that you're trying to make the person feel the nakshatras. I mean, can you tell me that more? We didn't really have much time when we were just casually chatting, but what do you mean? Okay, how are you making them feel these nakshatras?
Well, you just got to give them so much symbolism and mythology. Mythology is really key with the nakshatras. The more mythological stories you can give them, the more it begins to make sense. So generally what I tend to do is take the nakshatra qualities, like the kingdom of the nakshatra and the nature of the nakshatra, like Ugra and Krura. And I go through all those qualities. And then I do the mythological story at the end. Because when you do, it begins to kind of knit together all those different qualities so that the person gets an idea of how that nakshatra works. I'm very big on letting people know that really nakshatras are multifaceted, and that's why everybody has such a hard time really pinning down what nakshatras are about, because they're about so many different things, and it takes that active agent of a planet in it or a planet influencing it to really determine what it's going to do. And then sometimes as well, something I've been working with a lot lately is the different natures of different nakshatras. Like if you have one planet in a specific nakshatra and another planet in a different nakshatra and they aspect each other, those qualities those nakshatras share will get highlighted.
Okay, great.
And so I'm really big on helping people understand in that course that a lot of it depends on whatever is placed in that nakshatra. But in order to understand that nakshatra fully, you've got to understand what all these different qualities are about. Like, the kingdom, like the Dhatu kingdom being, mineral kingdom and being the focus being on being solid and equally needing to learn lessons around not expecting people to support you, really. I find that's really key with the Dhatu kingdom. And so just going through all these different qualities, like the races of the nakshatras, caste of the nakshatras, and helping them understand how all those different qualities come together to create the final energy of the nakshatra, really.
Yeah, I definitely, what a lot of people don't understand about nakshatras is that there's no astrology books really on nakshatras.
No.
We can grab an astrology book and they'll tell you all about the rashis and all about the houses and they'll tell you what the planets rule. But the astrology books, they don't tell us things about nakshatras because, the Brahmin caste, of course, in ancient days who would be practicing astrology, the nakshatras were just so interwoven into the religion that these guys knew the nakshatras before they knew how to calculate a horoscope, probably,
Right. It was second nature.
We don't have that, though. And so what's really been great is in recent years, a lot of people have been really diving into the whole nakshatra myth and trying to dig up all this information that the Brahmins used to just know in the old days. And of course, you're one of the ones that I know who are doing that. And what I'm curious about, so like the caste of the nakshatra, how do you put that to practical use?
Well, for instance, let's take, for instance, the Kshatriya nakshatras, right? So let's say, for instance, you've got a sun that's, beat up either by being poorly aspected or joining other difficult planets. And you've got that, the sun being a Kshatriya planet itself, being in a Kshatriya nakshatra. And what a lot of people like to call the dispositor of the nakshatra, but I like to call the emissary, also going through pardon me, a lot of difficulty as well, then there can be issues for that individual around pride coming into the equation, right?
Okay.
Sudra, like the Sudra nakshatras, like if you have Saturn in a Sudra nakshatra, the person can find themselves getting caught up in lessons of what they want to serve and why.
Okay.
And
again,
serving
Saturn's a Sudra planet.
Exactly, exactly. And you'll find sometimes, like, if you have a Kshatriya planet in a Sudra Nakshatra, that's going to, like, really kind of create this dynamic for the individual who's needing to learn how to take that Kshatriya noble nature and put it to service.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so a lot of potential areas of conflict and interest I could see them happening there. Okay,
Exactly.
yeah.
And that's really the magic of the Nakshatras, I find, is you have to kind of keep them, what's the best way to say it? You have to kind of keep them open and loose.
Okay.
And they're very hard to learn on that level because, it's not like the signs where you have like 12 and you can go through and you can learn like
Yeah.
these different qualities of 12 things. You've got like, 27 nakshatras that you're having to kind of try to commit a lot of different things to memory on. But once you begin to work on with them regularly, you begin to like remember, oh, well, this is that type of a nakshatra, this is another type of a nakshatra. And then all you have to do is go, oh, well, I've got this planet there. This is a Rajasic planet. It's a Rajasic nakshatra. So there's going to be some racy energy and some desire-oriented energy coming to the surface with this.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, of course, is dependent upon the well-being of the planet that's in it. And
Sure. Yeah, I've definitely noticed an interesting that the more lunar people are definitely drawn to using nakshatras more. And the more solar people are more drawn to use like rashis more commonly, in that it really is the natures. The lunar person is able to access that mystique and that all-knowingness, and it just needs a little bit of a feel for something, and then it's going to arrive at a truth. Where the solar person, they need, some much more obvious signposts that are more clear, more, let's say, concrete map. And so I, haven't really known you that well throughout my life. We've kind of associated a little bit, but I haven't really known much about you. And when I heard a couple of years ago that you were just focused on nakshatras and you're doing so much with nakshatras, and you would ask me to add something into the software, and it was always something about nakshatras. I started thinking, I think Michael's a lot different of a kind of person than I think he is. Has to be more lunar person who can just need to get his toe in the river and then go with the flow. And that's what I find about nakshatra people, is that the symbolism of the nakshatra is a much more watery lunar symbolism.
Definitely.
And because of that, though, when people started tuning themselves to that, they can actually go deeper, because, they can go deeper than people who just are focusing on the signs. Because while those are so concrete, once, it's kind of like walking on land. You're on the land and you can go where you're going to go, but you can't go any deeper. And the nakshatras have this world of depth that you can be on the surface of the water, you can go below the water, but so much of it is not as clear. And so a lot of people, I find, just really struggle with putting together a lot of these nakshatra things. And that's why I asked you the question about, okay, what do you do about these casts of the nakshatras, for instance? Because people ask me a lot, well, the planet's in Aries, which is the kshatriya, but the nakshatra is not the same cast. What am I doing here? And well, what you're doing is, are you going to read this, interpret this as them, swimming in the lake, or are you going to interpret this them walking on the land?
Right, exactly.
And it's a completely different level of interpretation. And I find that people really struggle with the fact that there are so many things about nakshatras, and so many details. There's their caste, there's the the race, there's the Data Mula Jiva. There's so many facets of nakshatras. And then there's all the mystical facets we can arrive at from the myths. And then there's this picture that's just so contrary sometimes to what we're expecting from a Rashi, that it's really easy for people to get confused. So I was really excited to hear that you're doing this class where you're really getting people to immerse themselves into that river of each nakshatra, to clear up a lot of that stuff. Because I find so many people want to use nakshatras, but they don't, know how to. And the people I know who've done the best with them are people like yourself, who've just basically spent the time figuring it out, getting in touch with the nakshatras, observing things in nakshatras, watching transits and nakshatras, looking at thousands of charts and studying nakshatras and finding every myth, every story you can. But it's not something where you can just tell a person, oh, go get this book and you'll have everything you need to know on nakshatras. You can't do that. On Rashis, I can say, oh, just go do this course and you've got everything you need on Rashis, you know, or planets. But with nakshatras, there's only a handful of people who are really diving into that ocean, really, of mystique.
Definitely, definitely. And nakshatras are very, I want to use the term conditional. Whereas, you know, like with Rashis, they're very, you know, much more defined and cut and dry.
Yeah.
With nakshatras, they define the condition of the thing. Much like in the same way for people who might do a little bit of work with the Varga deities, they do the very same thing. And so they define a lot more of the subjective experience of what your client is going through, which is really helpful on the therapeutic level. So for instance, as an astrologer, if you're predicting something concrete for the individual, the nakshatras will give a bit of a hint or a clue as to what they're being asked to resolve or what they're being asked to work with in order to improve those particular things. And I was very glad when you did the translation of Taittiriya Brahmana, because I've been using that like pretty much religiously as like remedies for the nakshatras that things are placed in. And I'm getting so many excellent results from people.
Do you have people chant the mantra or the sutra on each nakshatra? Great, perfect.
Yeah,
and for
exactly.
those who don't know, I did a translation of this work, which is probably the oldest thing we have on nakshatras, where really they talk about each nakshatra and describe every nakshatra. And it's in its most deepest meaning. You can get a copy of that from astrology-videos.com or Vedic-astrology.net. It's at the very top of the page. There's a link to it in English or Romanian at this point. So I really urge everyone to get a copy of that, and you can start seeing what Michael is really working with here. So that's great. So you're using those. And again, this Brahmana book that these are from, this is a handbook that were written for the priests. And it's just information so the priests can do their proper rituals and their proper the propitiations properly.
That's a rough word.
Too many pros in there. And it's really the finest thing we have on nakshatras. And anyone who wants to get into nakshatras really, I think, should start and end there and take everything else as in the middle. It's really the most valuable thing we have on nakshatras.
Definitely. If you meditate on each one of those sutras, and that's another thing I have people do, is just really kind of read through it, read all the different meanings of the words, keep it open, and just work with the sutra daily and let it kind of unravel meaning for you over time.
Yeah. Yeah. And also I think what you're saying about the difference between the signs and the nakshatras is that the minute you put a planet in the sign, it has a dignity.
Yeah.
So there's something about that planet that you can't escape. So if you stick Saturn in Taurus or Libra, it's in a natural friend sign. It's going to be delighted. There's a part of that Saturn that's always going to have something good to it, and nothing will take that away entirely. You know, but there's something about that that is dependable. And every planet has a dignity in the sign, and that's putting a stamp of, okay, there's one thing you know about this planet that will never go away. But the minute you drop a planet in the nakshatra, there's no definition to that planet
yet. It's completely different. And, you know, I find quite often I get a lot of people who go, well, wouldn't Venus in Purva Ashada Nakshatra be strong? Or wouldn't Mercury in its own nakshatra be strong? And I have to go, it doesn't really work.
It doesn't work that way at all, right?
And, you know, I'm very big on explaining to people, I've kind of started using the term, rather than dispositor, emissary.
Okay.
Because I like using the concept of getting people to connect to the deities that are associated with each nakshatra. Is that the reason we have planets connected with the nakshatras like that is for the formation of dashas specifically. But you can find out I want to use the term polarity of the nakshatra by taking a look at the planet that's connected to the nakshatra. But a better way to understand that, rather than saying it rules this, because it doesn't rule it, is to call it an emissary, because just like in old times, a king would send a messenger to another village, right?
Yeah.
If that messenger was, you know, able-bodied, had a sharp mind, could ride for long periods of time. He'd get to the other kingdom, give the message to the other king, absolutely no problem whatsoever. But if he was a dullard and worn out, he'd get to the other kingdom, give the wrong message, and create all sorts of problems, right?
Yeah,
And
that's
so
really
it
the
works the same
perfect
way.
word, I think, for it. In KP astrology, the lore, the planet in a nakshatra works through its lore. So it's actually directing energy to the place where its nakshatra emissary is. And so
Right.
literally with KP, it's literally working as an emissary. And I think also that a lot of the things that have to do with the nakshatras is that I think nakshatras really have a lot to show with just how natural life on its most natural level.
Oh, definitely.
The first nakshatra in the Brahmana Sutras is, the Kritika, which is the beginning of life. And the last nakshatra is, Bharani, which is Yama, which is death.
Death.
So it's really, it's a circle of life, and there's just this process of life that the nakshatras are representing. It's just a very, very natural process. And there's no escaping that natural process. All of us are operating in the context of this natural process of how life works, how life is living, and we can be so at odds with that, though.
Exactly.
In fact, anyone who comes to an astrologer is at odds with how their life is, with the life within them, with the life that is the circle of the nakshatras, basically.
Right.
And,
yes.
And that creates confusion, and that creates anxiety, and that creates fears. So a lot of these things people are suffering from, they come to astrologers, they come because there's a nakshatra in their chart with a planet in it that they're getting stuck on. That's the nakshatra that's confusing them and throwing that whole circle of life off. Completely. And so I was really excited to hear that you're actually doing these courses where you're focusing on this therapy and telling people how to work with these nakshatras better, doing remedials for these nakshatras, because really our problem is that we're in a state of confusion with the life flowing through us, which is the nakshatras. And if we can resolve that state of confusion, then we don't need to go to the astrologer and say, when will I get married? We'll know out of clarity that I'm not married now because, oh my God, I don't even want to be married now.
Right, exactly.
It's not even right for me to be married now, because there's a time, there's a nakshatra, that's the right time for meeting someone and getting married, right? There's those nakshatras for that stage of life where life within us is ready to connect and share life with another person and even have an offspring with another person. There's a ready time for that in the circle of our life. But if we're confused along that circle, we'll think that there's certain times for things when it's not, and it's past time for this, and it's not time for this, and life is crazy, And that's why people go to astrologers. So the work you're doing is just it could really help people come to this place of peace and health with that confusion of what their life force is really trying to do. Because really the life force is being sparked at Kritika, and it's getting extinguished at Bharani. And everything else in between is just what that life is doing after it's been sparked at Kritika and how it's going to be snuffed out on this plane. And there's a process of that life force being ready. And with what you're doing, you're allowing people to step back into that process instead of fighting it, resisting it, thinking otherwise, and suffering all that confusion, which is why they come.
Exactly. And one thing I'm, especially with people who are coming to me to learn the nakshatras, who are already astrologers, is I'm really big on them understanding the symbolism. And I try to get them to tune into that by looking at the moon's nakshatra every day, right? Mm-hmm. And just really trying to feel it, see if you can pick up on the energy of that, or see if you see the symbolism connected like with your day somehow. Because if you learn that symbolism, the moment that you sit with a client and they start talking to you, they'll just rattle off words and you'll go, oh, you've got this planet in this nakshatra, and you absolutely know where to go for them. Perfect. Because they're dropping you the hints, I had one client once upon a time, somewhere along the lines of this story, whose father had committed suicide um, when they were a child, sadly enough. And interestingly enough, the indicator for, father and for the death was in Bharani Nakshatra, which is connected to Yama, which is always, carrying a noose. And that was the method of suicide with that. And on the more positive level, we get these little drop to us by the nakshatras all the time. And what they are is they're like little signposts that are going, look, there's something right now that you're needing to pay attention to over the course of your day. And if you pay attention to it because I'm giving you this message, then you're gonna get a lesson that's gonna help you to work with the energy of the day more effectively, or overall in your life if you're going through a difficult period. It's about tuning into that symbolism and going, what do I need to rectify in order to to make something better? Like, let's give for instance, like working with Shravana Nakshatra. Sometimes Shravana people have this tendency to think that everybody is talking about them, especially if there's a difficult moon. There's a tendency I found for them to go, well, people might say something about me. My reputation might be at stake. And there's also lessons to learn around too many choices, to the extent that the person becomes confused in regards to which of those choices they should tune into, and how to look at the essence beneath all those different opportunities and kind of fine tune it, rather than trying to hone in on one specific path. And so with planets in Shravana Nakshatra, it's a lot about, well, if you're confused about direction with that planet, look at the essence of where you need to be going with this, rather than look at the panorama, the vista, rather than the finite destination you're trying to get to, right? Or if you're concerned about what other people are going to think about you and then therefore don't feel supported because it's a Dhatu Nakshatra, then you need to work on just being solid and strong within yourself so that ultimately that doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because minerals are the support. They're here to support, not be supported.
Exactly. Terrific. Right. Completely. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. What you were saying just a moment ago about, just watching the moon's nakshatra every day, and you went on about getting into the flow of things and the little lessons that might be there. For those people who don't know, I wanted to mention that where we have all of our nakshatra information outside of mythology and outside the Brahmana Sutras is the Muhurta books, which are the books for when, the rules for when do I start an event. And one of the most important things, and really the things that the books always start with, are the nakshatras. Nakshatras are good for certain events and not so good for other events. And what that means is it's really just on the life force, the life energy of the moon in its nakshatra. That's the energy that, that's the energy that life is putting out.
Exactly.
Well, that's what can live and take birth and flourish at that time. So if we do something under a certain nakshatra that nakshatra is, focused on, the thing has a life and energy to move forward. If we do it in nakshatra that, like for instance, there's upward facing and downward facing nakshatras.
Yes, exactly.
So if we build, a building in a downward facing nakshatra and we want to build a 10-story building, we're going to have so many problems.
Limitation. Yes.
The energy of life is saying it's time to go down. So when you dig your plumbing and do your sewers and dig your septic tank, oh my gosh, you're going to save money. It's all going to work great. But the minute you start, minute after you did that, that foundation, you start building up, everything's going to go wrong from that point onward. And so as you watch your nakshatras, you'll get a feel for them, because you'll see things that, you don't get to choose what you get to do every day, right? You just have, your boss says, oh, you have to do this today. And you're like, oh, but it's a down nakshatra. How can I do it? You got to do it. It's your job.
Right.
And you'll just notice, wow, this nakshatra is really letting me know what the energy is available to. And ideally, we as sensitive beings, as not just flesh and blood and a brain, but as, beings that have sensitivities and all kinds of consciousness, we have the ability to be attuned to nature of the moment. And if we were all attuned to that, a boss would never say, all right, let's start building up today, on the house, He would say, oh, well, everyone take a day off because, we finished all the groundwork. We got to start building up, and we ain't going to start doing it today. And I'm going to pay you guys, go have a free vacation day. And he's going to save money compared to doing it that day,
Exactly, right.
And so if we were attuned with that, we would just never do the wrong thing at the wrong time. And so it's really important for people to watch that and see how those nakshatras work, and then start looking at their charts and seeing how, wow, I can see I've been trying to force my relationships in this opposite direction of the nakshatra of my seventh cusp and the nakshatra of my seventh lord and the nakshatra of my Venus. And no wonder relationships are never working. I'm trying to push them in the opposite direction of what relationships will actually flourish in my life. So there's so many ways you can use that, but like you said, it begins with good information that you can provide, and it begins with just watching every day and looking for those signals, because those signals are saying this is where life can move forward today, versus anything else won't move forward today. So why bother doing it?
Yeah, it's interesting that you, along the lines of what you were talking about just then, I have had a lot of clients over the years who have a career planet in Mrigashira Nakshatra.
Okay.
And without fail, they always have a tendency to think that they're not succeeding when they really should be succeeding. And the message that I hear every single time is, well, everybody else that I know has figured out what they're going to be, and I don't have a clue as to what I'm going to be. Well, the reason they don't have a clue is the whole energy of Mrigashira Nakshatra is about working on something, figuring out what doesn't work, taking it apart, putting it back together again, and continually refining that process over and over again. So I find people with career planets in Mrigashira Nakshatra, what the lesson is learning that you might be doing something now that doesn't work out and blaming yourself for it. And then you go to another job and you do that job and you you don't work with that anymore. And you go through like 3 or 4 different jobs like that, and you go, wow, I'm really a failure because I haven't figured out what I'm good at yet. But then they generally find this one moment in their life when all those things that they had done during their life come together under one umbrella.
Gotcha.
And then they go, oh, now I see what I was supposed to be doing. And so they think they've been wandering, but they haven't been wandering at all. And it's just it's like we've been saying, it's like getting people to work with the energy of the nakshatra that planet is in a productive way, rather than, feeling like, I don't want this in my life.
Yeah, because we all have these concepts of, the society we're grown in. There's this, every society has this idea of this is the schedule of life, but that's just the schedule of a culture. It has nothing to do with an individual's life, right? And
I'm glad you said that.
It's really our nakshatras that show the schedule of your life, what phase of existence you're in, what you can give birth to in this world, in this life, where your energy can flow and where it won't flow. And all those mysteries are in the nakshatras, though. And they're not what our parents tell us to do. They're not what our guidance counselor tells us to do. And they're most certainly not what our country thinks we should do.
Exactly.
And the amount of happiness that is robbed from people because they force themselves into this false way of being, that really the nakshatras show. The planets and the signs, they have to do with our intelligence, and if we're acting in an intelligent way or not intelligent way. So a planet that's in a good avashta, we can use that planet in a way that it can produce. In a bad avashta, it can produce happiness.
Yes.
In a bad avashta, it won't produce happiness. But if we're really flowing with life with all that, because people can produce, but it can all be contrary to who they are.
Exactly.
And so the nakshatra is really the life within us that is us, beyond all these constraints of our culture and family. And so getting in touch with that can, for a lot of people, be the most healing experience in their charts. And of course, I know that's how you're using these too. So when you do a reading now, how much is nakshatras and how much is not nakshatra?
Pretty pretty much all of it, except like, what's the phrase I want to use? Except fine tuning the concrete predictive thing, if you
Okay.
know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. But even with the nakshatras, I'm doing that. Like, for instance, if I'm looking at when somebody might purchase a home and I'm seeing, like, 11th house cusp or 4th house cusp, because I do a lot of work with house cusps,
Hmm.
either one of those being in Punarvasu nakshatra, and Jupiter somehow being involved in the equation, that becomes a really strong force for it, because Punarvasu is symbolized by a house, right?
Hmm.
And so even with that, I'm using nakshatras quite often as a deciding factor.
Yeah.
um, I'm doing, like, for career prediction, like what somebody should do, I'm doing Jaimini techniques for career prediction.
Hmm.
But then once I've kind of whittled down the career planets and the houses and house customs, I'm going in and just doing all nakshatra work. And it helps me to get a lot more of the finer tuned qualities
Of the
what
career.
that individual
Yeah.
might be doing that you wouldn't really see otherwise. And it's really helpful for that. And so I
Okay.
would say pretty much everything I do is with nakshatras. And like, if I'm going in and I'm looking at the houses that are active, I'm even pulling out those house cusp nakshatras and
Perfect.
going in, giving a little more information in terms of the subtleties, and
Hmm.
explaining, like, if the person, because you can have a person in a very productive time, like what you're saying, right? Like, they can be in a productive time to get married, or they can be in a productive time to buy a house. And so, yeah, that's going to come through. And it, on a certain level, it may make the individual feel like, if it's an exalted planet, radiant about how it's all coming together. But there's going to be a lot of subtleties, like that the nakshatras are growing along the way, that can be either pleasant or difficult mixed in along the way. And you can really help the individual out with, with learning those things and going, well, if you have a specific instance come up where, like, let's say, for instance, Bharani Nakshatra is involved in it somehow, and like there's a weak Venus involved, and the individual's going through a lot of difficulty with the process. Like, maybe they're having a hard time finding a buyer for their old house, and you just go, well, if you can just let go of your attachment to, like, what you think you should get for that old house, then you might find that you're able to move on from it and find something better for yourself that you're able to move towards. And you'll find the nakshatras really play out in that particular manner and help the individual to understand in a little more detail the path or the actions that they need to take to kind of involve themselves in the process.
Hmm. Okay, great. So tell me about this nakshatra course you're teaching right now.
What do you want to know about it?
Okay, so you're teaching a class, and it's a class on each nakshatra?
Each specific nakshatra, at this point, I think this Friday we're on to Mrigashira.
Oh, okay, so this is just started. Okay.
It's just started, yeah. I mean, I started with Ashwini rather than starting with Kritika, but we're on to Mrigashira this week. And what we're doing is we're just going in, looking at the qualities of the nakshatra, understanding how all those different qualities kind of tie in overall to the energy of the nakshatra. I generally start each class by going into the sutra from Tayatiriya Brahmana,
Hmm.
explaining to newcomers. And so there's a lot of reviewing what Tayatiriya Brahmana is really about at the beginning of each class, because I generally have some new students each week. But really understanding through Tayatiriya Brahmana what the energy of the nakshatra is about, because it'll give a pretty clear perspective on it. And then
Yeah.
you go in and you fill in the details with each of those individual qualities. And it helps the person to see how all these different facets come together to make the greater whole. And then I generally finish it off with some mythological stories at the end, because then that gives the person something that's entertaining to remember, that equally kind of draws together all the specific things that they've learned about that particular nakshatra. And I'm thinking later on in the year, after I finish this, that I'm going to go in and teach a very fine-tuned technique
Okay.
course tying in with all of these, because I've been doing a lot of work lately. I think I may have mentioned it at the beginning of our talk, with taking all the different nakshatra qualities. I'll even take a piece of paper and I'll write down like every single quality of each nakshatra, which is a really great way to learn the nakshatras,
Yeah.
by the way, because you just write it down, it becomes very tangible. And I'll go through and I'll look at all the different planets and nakshatras that are involved in the event, and I'll see what the commonality is, and I'll also see where the friction is. and it really helps to give a a great prediction along
Okay,
those lines. And I
great.
find that's really the best way to work with the Nakshatras. And there's some ways to judge strength too, which are a little too long-winded probably to go into.
Sure. Okay. And for people, they can just sign up for one class, like if they want to just learn about their
Hmm.
nakshatra, and
Exactly.
or they can sign up for the whole course and get it prorated and still get the readings or get the previous recordings basically for free if they
And the
want to jump in
PowerPoint
late.
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can do that full course payment either in full or by semester. And it's a lot more affordable at that rate. I mean,
Okay.
some people just like coming to one class. And so for that, it's like $40 for each class. But if you're doing the whole course in full, it reduces that price in total by almost half at that point.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, I'll put a little link to your website. It's on your website there,
Yep.
and then they can check that out, those who want to learn more, because there's just not a lot of people doing nakshatras and are teaching nakshatras in a really organized form. And I found that all the books out there have some good stuff, but none of them have enough still. I still don't think the definitive book on nakshatras has been written, although we have better books on nakshatras than we've ever had, you know. But there's still a lot more writing that needs to be done on them. So I think your course is filling a void for a lot of people.
And I do have a book in the works, but what ends up happening for me is that I continually revise techniques.
Yeah.
And so then I go, no, actually now I'm on to something else with this, and refining it and everything like that. So
Yeah.
by the time I finish it, it'll be like, 3,000 pages or something.
Yeah. I mean, really, being an astrologer is really all about refining,
It is.
It's kind of like growing spiritually, we're constantly becoming more spiritually refined. Doesn't matter how much we know, we still have more refinement ahead of us.
That we can do, yeah.
Yeah, and that's, the why we're, gurus are called gurus. And we have our astrology gurus, we have our, spiritual gurus, we have our gurus in all things. And guru simply means heavy. It doesn't mean perfect. So the guru is just someone who's heavier than us in what they know. So, and basically, that's what being refined is. It's about getting heavier, right? Like when you refine gold, you get all this dirt that's heavy, and you refine it, and you get more gold percentage, and that's heavy, right?
Exactly.
And
right.
so we're always getting more heavy, getting more refined in whatever we're doing on Earth. And so there's a point where a book is written at the point where a person goes, all right, this is heavy enough to finally publish. And the minute it's out in print, you're heavier than it.
Exactly.
Right. And that's just the nature of it. And so it'll come out when it's the right time, when the right nakshatra is hitting you.
Well, I was just going to share, I just finished a nakshatra technique course earlier this year.
Uh-huh.
And the last one I did prior to that, I think was about 2 years prior. And already just finishing this nakshatra technique course, I'm going, I think I have to plan another nakshatra technique course for next year, because I'm just completely on to different things.
You'll find another way to make it a little better. I know. Exactly.
Yeah.
Been there, done that. But that's the joy of astrology,
It really is.
Take it deeper, it's just like that. You dive 100 feet and you hold your breath and you go, wow, I can see so much at 100 below. And then, you get up to the top, but your lungs are a little stronger. So next time you go under, you get 110 feet and you see more things. And it never stops. There's no bottom to the ocean.
That's why it's so wonderful. I always tell people, you don't pick astrology picks you. But then once it picks you, it kind of pulls you under that water sometimes.
Yeah, it's definitely a tidal wave that comes and grabs you off the shore and never lets you go.
Yes, right.
Okay, perfect. I'll put some information where people can download the course, and I'll also put a link where you can download the Brahmana text.
Definitely, yes.
So you can get a better idea of what Michael's really working with. When you read those sutras, you'll be really intrigued. And then I'm sure you'll welcome any questions they might have if they want to email you about a curiosity or something.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
definitely.
Perfect.
And they can contact me through my website. There's a contact page that they can do.
Great. All right, well, thanks for showing up and letting us know what you're doing a little bit more.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I can talk about nakshatras for hours.